and you're watching CNBC TV 18.
Brought to you by Life Technology.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable. Life Technologies and CNBC TV 18 present Unlocking DNA on a Silicon Chip.
Hello and welcome to a special discussion, Unlocking DNA on a Silicon Chip. Let me start by introducing my panelists. On my extreme left, Dr. Purvish Parekh, medical oncologist and hematologist and Managing Director, AmeriCares India. Gregory Lucier, CEO of Life Technologies, one of the world's leading medical technology companies, and Dr. Vijay Chandru, the Chairman of the Association of Biotech-Led Enterprises and the CEO of Strand Life Sciences. Greg, when I was in school and I heard about Crick and Watson and the double helix, it obviously blew all our minds to know that two guys figured out this dramatic design of human DNA. Many years later, we heard about the Human Genome Project, which was attempting to map out the 25,000 genes in the human being. And that was a good 10 years ago. What does the future hold? What does DNA hold for humanity's future?
If you just trace our steps from 10 years ago with that first Human Genome Project, which was about $3 billion, it took several years to do, to now today we're able to read an entire human genome for 50,000 rupees in 2 hours. I think the next 10 years will be just as incredible in terms of the rate of innovation of reading this DNA. And so what does it all mean to us as humans on this planet? I think it has this kind of dual aspect. One is it makes us think of our own mortality because it's predestiny in some cases, and not all cases, of what our future holds in terms of our DNA. But also it is bordering on the consciousness of maybe we're tinkering with life.
Let me stop you there, Greg. We've always been tinkering with life. From simple eugenics of choosing a hardier plant and letting a weed die, we've always been in the business of choosing hardier life forms, whether it's natural Darwinism or human-imposed Darwinism. So what's new about this form of tinkering with life? What's the big deal about it?
I think you phrased it perfectly. There's nothing new about it. In fact, we're going to be able to do it in a much more scientific and selective way to have even better outcomes.
Dr. Parekh, the human genome was probably arguably the largest ever scientific project undertaken in human history. And it mapped the human genome, and there were lots of surprising findings, some predictable findings and some surprising findings. Give us an overall big picture sense of what the human genome means for humanity. What does it mean that we can map 25,000 genes?
So if you look at the birth of a human being, it's fertilization of two cells, right? And that gives 23 pairs of chromosomes, okay, in one single cell, which you require a microscope to look at. Okay. But if you pull out the DNA from there and you put it end to end, it's 3 meters long, okay, and that carries the entire information for that life form through its entirety. Okay. And then there are switches that genes get on and off, and depending on that, the cell decides to do a particular function. Okay. So each cell has the brain or the information to do everything that an organ can do, but less than 1% of the genes are actually functional at any given time.
Exactly, 1% of the genes functional at any point.
At any given time. So that is the complexity of the whole thing.
Okay.
And if you can figure out by using a computer, for instance, what is right and what is wrong, and what is disease and what is normal, then that is the beginning of curing all ailments.
Dr. Chandru, I understand that my entire DNA sequence can be on this chip, and Greg, in less than 2 hours, you can take a drop of my blood and figure it all out and put my entire life story onto this. What do I do with this now? If I were to give this to you and say, show me the applications that you can do with my life on a chip, what can I expect back from you?
Well, we can bring it all the way from what is just a sequence of fragments of a sequence, okay, all the way to the actual mutations and what they mean in the context of either a therapeutic strategy or actually finding the subtype of the disease itself, or telling you about some probability of.
So you can tell me if I'm predisposed to get cancer at age 60 or not get cancer at age 60 or
with certain probabilities and so on.
Well, Greg, I'm coming back to you. Give us an overview of some of the non-obvious applications of DNA sequencing in agriculture.
Oh, in agriculture?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the most exciting ones would be in the area of biofuels, in that if we can use this technology with some insights, potentially down the road we could engineer a species like algae to make the inputs to refine gasoline. And we could free ourselves from digging up dead organic matter in the ground.
Great. Are we going to have to fundamentally reinvent school curricula, medical college curricula, and the way we teach science in the light of DNA sequencing and gene sequencing?
Well, I think we're already starting.
Is this the quantum physics of the biology and computing world?
I think we're on an irreversible course, but certainly medical school is going to have to change. They do not teach enough genetics in medical school. I'm told at Harvard Medical School there's 2 to 3 weeks of genetics. Obviously, in a multi-year course, we've got to change that.
2 to 3 years is more like it.
That's probably right.
What's going to happen. Dr. Chandru, I want to come back to you once again. We spoke about the German E. coli outbreak. Give us a sense of what happens in the world. What is an epidemic? What's a pandemic? And what's all the fuss about?
Yes, in fact, this is a very important application of these kinds of technologies, because I do believe that our ability to respond to pathogen outbreaks of various kinds, whether these are natural epidemics in some sense or even man-made. So I do think biodefense and public health are two sides of the same coin. And so our preparedness to be able to quickly analyze the strain of the pathogen and be able to come up with the right antidotes is really absolutely critical. And these technologies are now getting us to a point where we can respond. And I think when the Berlin or the problem in Germany happened, basically a lot of us were looking at the data and trying to figure out the metagenomics that was involved in analyzing the strains of the E. coli.
This actually happens every year. So WHO makes an announcement that says that influenza for the next year is going to involve these particular strains of viruses. And if we are able to do that and predict for a larger number of illnesses or infections, I think the world will be a safer place.
On that note, it's time for a quick break. On the other side of this break, we explore the forensic side of genome mapping. There is no involvement of any of the molecule or optics, so it will be a sort of almost natural way of understanding the biomolecules. So as we say, as a technologist, we find that these molecules or technologies will be revolutionizing.
This technology would be similar to the chip which actually powered laptops and computers, and today the same chip which makes even an iPhone so powerful. So this is a game-changing technology. It has accelerated both the capacity and the speed and the accuracy of outcomes.
Welcome back. You're watching a special panel discussion, Unlocking DNA on a Silicon Chip. And Greg, I'm coming back to you on this. Now, clearly we've seen all this in movies. When you have a murder, you have a drop of blood. We know who the real murderer is from a drop of blood. We can identify genetic sequencing and DNA sequencing with 99.99% accuracy. A movie is 99.99% accurate?
Well, it's even more than 99.99. It's 6 nines accuracy. And this is a common technique that's used in countries all over the world for basic criminal work to case studies to now even petty crimes in some cities. And the reason is that criminality is a recidivist activity. It's usually the same people, and it's important that you identify who they are.
And this includes non-criminal activities like paternity tests, like age determination, and all of that. It unfolds. Give us a sense of what potential it holds in those areas.
Well, I think it's enormous, actually. It ranges from, again, crime fighting to terrorism to human trafficking of children, to identifying those children and reuniting them with their parents.
Even in disasters, or where you find a mass grave or hundreds of people who have died because of a bomb blast, this technology will be able to identify each and every individual who was involved in that, just by taking scraps of material that was left.
One of the projects we were involved in a few years ago was with the Brazilian government when the Air France flight went down over the Atlantic Ocean, identifying all the people who perished. We used DNA to identify those people so that there could be closure with their families.
And one of the big selling points of your company's technology is that all of this can be done at less than 50,000 rupees per.
What I do know is that in clinical applications, in the practice of medicine, the use of reading the DNA will become much more commonplace.
Okay.
Not just in cancer, but in many diseases.
Okay.
It's the 21st century stethoscope.
That's a nice definition, the stethoscope of the 21st century. Yes, Dr. Chandru,
The think tank Jason in the US, which is really sort of the think tank of scientific, the best scientific minds, they have predicted that the cost of sequencing can actually go down to about $100. And the time frame that they've predicted is actually just not that far away. I'm not going to put Greg under pressure.
Your company, Dr. Chandru, creates software packages that analyze, interpret, and transfer this. Tell us a little bit about the kind of products that you manufacture.
Right. So obviously, these guys are spitting out, actually terabytes of data.
Okay.
And then, even when the images get converted into sequence fragments, you're still in the 100 gigabytes range. Now that has to be processed and assembled into a sequence, which is a huge computational problem. Now, so not only do you have lots of data, you also have heavy computational challenges. And then after you align the sequence, you have all the annotation. You have to be looking for mutations. Now remember, this is sequence. So you have to go down to the level of a single letter and actually see whether, the letter has been flipped or there's a gap or a deletion or an insertion. So this requires browsing in the very large to browsing at the very minute. Okay. So there's some enormous software challenges involved in this, and our company addresses these. It takes about 1.5 million lines of Java code to do that. Right? So it's been a long.
And I imagine there are applications that are iPad friendly, that are handheld friendly, where doctors in the field, medical professionals are on.
That's the direction in which it's heading, really. And again, these measurement technologies are helping us move from the bench to the bedside, and at the bedside, you would expect that the doctor really wants to see these things.
I think DNA sequencing is just the first of a series of developments that are moving science to engineering in terms of human life.
Okay.
And so you can see here there's an enormous amount of computational work that takes place. And we know this India economy is phenomenal, world-class in terms of computational excellence. And so I think as more DNA sequencing takes place, more computation takes place.
And there are opportunities for 1 million more entrepreneurs to set up companies. And Greg, I want to talk to you about the interactions between your engagements with the Indian government, for instance.
Sure.
Dr. Parikh talked about the UID project, which is apparently the largest ever project of its nature attempted anywhere in the world. 1 billion people mapped. What kind of potential does that kind of activity hold for life sciences?
Well, we think in time that this national identity project might include another metric, could be DNA, we hope, and that the DNA could be very important for people in the armed services or certain sensitive roles where you absolutely want to know who that person is.
Okay.
And so I think in time you could see DNA to be part of that overall project.
And you are actively engaging with governments, not just in India. You were telling us that you engage with governments around the world.
We are. There are certain governments that want to know exactly who their citizens are and who are visitors to their country, and they're genotyping, they're sequencing their entire populations.
Once again, time for a quick break. A fascinating discussion, unlocking DNA on a silicon chip. That continues after the break.
Traditionally, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, particularly in emerging markets where price has always been a barrier. I think that barrier is going to be broken thanks to technologies such as this one.
What I saw and heard from here about the launch of the Proton, so it means that we have in our hands now ways and means to do very cheap and very fast sequencing at a large scale.
Welcome back. You're watching a special discussion, Unlocking DNA on a Silicon Chip. It's time to look into the future. Doctor, give us a sense of what's going to happen to the world of medicine, to the world of diseases, to the world of the way human beings and let's say the medical industry and the disease cycle, their interactions. How is that going to change with this?
10, 15 years from now, the fact that we will have such an amazing understanding of microbes and of plants of various kinds also opens up a completely new world in which you would be thinking about how you manufacture materials, how you clean up, industrial waste, how you, take care of things like nuclear, damage, and all of these you will be able to do simply because you will have mapped so many different types of microbes and plant varieties and so on that you will have that information. So the impact on the environment and industrial applications are also, just waiting around the corner. Also in the lab at Bangalore, we have sequenced the neem genome. And the lab has the iron torrent and the solid 5500 machine. So it's
And what does neem hold for us? What is mapping?
well, it's part of our traditional knowledge, right? And so the idea of connecting traditional knowledge now with molecular understanding is immense, right? Because I think once you can start showing the mechanisms of, say, these medicinal plants, I think the allopathic medical practice would be much more willing to adopt and integrate them into practice.
So neem actually keeps away pests. Okay. So what is it in the genome? What is it that it produces? Okay. That is able to help, and unraveling that information would be immensely beneficial to preventing parasites from getting into human beings.
I want to come to you here once again. Tell us a little bit about what medical potential this whole technology holds. Putting DNA on a silicon chip. What can it do for me?
Well, I think its best application, probably its first application, will be with cancer. Cancer is a disease of the DNA, and we think that it will become common course for us to read your DNA, to understand the DNA of your cancer, understand where the mutations exist, and then target them very specifically with the right therapies that will solve your cancer.
Okay. Dr. Parikh, same question to you once again. Give us an overall sense of how this kind of technology is going to impact the world of medicine.
All of us are exposed to some damage that causes some changes in the DNA.
Is there a natural part of life?
Phenomenon. So every year 3,000 times my cells will have some mutation or some DNA change that can lead to disease, including cancer. Okay. But the body is smart enough to repair most of them, and therefore we don't get illness. But when that repairing doesn't happen, that's when the illness starts. And particularly for cancer, each cancer, and there are 200 different types of cancer, so each cancer is correlated with a specific genetic stable mutation that leads to abnormal cells. Okay. So we now know some aspects of how the disease occurs, and with additional information like this chip provides us, we can now identify how to switch off that mutated gene or how to repair it, okay, and therefore increase the chance of cure.
Doctor, many people erroneously believe that the rate of cancer is a direct correlation between modern lifestyles of living in cities, of eating processed foods, of breathing polluted air. And a lot of people believe that if we went back to a kinder, gentler and natural environment, cancer would actually decline. Do you agree?
No, I think the recent increase in certain cancers is definitely related to lifestyle. Yeah. And that is not necessarily just the environment pollution that damages the DNA, but the lifestyle choices actually influence the genetic makeup. And the mutation is the change in the genetic makeup which is responsible for disease.
Okay. All right, great. Last question for you. The future of life sciences in India over the next few years, what kind of growth are you seeing here? What kind of market size are you seeing here? What kind of penetration are you seeing?
Well, we're growing at 40% year over year.
Okay.
We see just that growth continuing in the future. We see more R&D happening here, more manufacturing happening here.
Okay.
We're just incredibly excited about the dynamism of the Indian economy.
Dr. Parikh, final question for you. You spoke about cancer, you spoke about TB, we spoke about a whole bunch of medical implications of putting DNA on a silicon chip. My question to you is simple. Can we make cancer vanish from the planet?
Right now we can't cure people simply because we don't have that information as to what is the problem and therefore what is the right treatment.
Okay.
If they provide the information and they crunch that data to give us a meaningful manner, then we can definitely design and treat patients to eradicate diseases like cancer.
This is a giant leap ahead. This is not a small evolutionary step. This is a fundamental redefinition of the way the medical science is practiced.
Right.
A combination of...
So we won't have to depend on him so much.
Dr. Parikh, Greg Lucier and Dr. Vijay Chandru, thank you very much for being part of this discussion, and thank you for watching CNBC TV 18.
Life Technologies and CNBC TV 18 present Unlocking DNA on a Silicon Chip.